Hello, I'm William Gallagher. This is the 58 Keys Writing Workshop. It's a workshop where I tell you how I happen to write something, and then you, please, disagree with me in the comments. I need that. It's the only way, isn't it? It's got to work that way. This time, don't ask questions in articles. So, why shouldn't you ask questions in articles? Look at that. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's stuck in my throat there. You just had to listen to it. I had to actually say it aloud. It's painful. It's painful because that question did absolutely not one single thing for you. You already know what this video is about. You clicked on it. I've already said quite stridently, really, that you shouldn't ask questions in articles. You know that the next thing I'm going to say is why. Of course it is. So that question, it's not for you. It's for me. I'm going to say it's for me. It's for the kind of writer who asks questions in an articles. The thing of it is, it's a crutch. I'll throw in some more if we go, if I can possibly bear to, and you'll see this more as we go if you haven't already. But look, you're a writer, I can say this to you and you'll get it. Writing is, of course, not just about the words you use, it's about the words you don't use, and every word, whether you use it directly or not, also inescapably reveals the writer. And in this case, what a question like that reveals, what a question like that tells me is the writer was floundering. He or she didn't know what to write next. They'd dried up, they'd run out of steam, and the word count was nowhere near close. Okay, so what should a writer do instead? No, that's the last one. I can't do it. I can't do those again. Like I said, you came in knowing the topic, you clicked on the video. I gave you at least some reason why asking questions is so bad. It is impossible now, impossible, that the next thing I'm going to say to you will be anything other than what to do instead of asking questions. Consequently, so what should it, yeah, all that stuff, that is death in a piece. You know how hard it is to get someone to just even start reading something of yours, anything of yours. If you find a way to throw them out of the story, out of the piece, the article, you'll never get them back. Now, when I am reading a piece and I hit a question, I'm out. It's no longer a pleasure to read it. I am no longer in the company of a writer who is confidently taking me somewhere. I've just, it's a list of facts in some order that it might be random. It's probably just increasingly desperate. If I'm reading for pleasure, well, I'm not now. I'm gone. If it's for work, if it's research, well, then I'm disengaged from the piece and I just start jumping down the page, doing it like a fast skim to see whatever it is I was working on, whatever I'm looking for. Is there some detail I need? Well, fast kind of now. So questions are, firstly, completely unnecessary. Secondly, death to a piece. But I keep saying to you that I've said this thing, therefore I am, of course, going to say this next thing next. That isn't an accident. That route isn't chance. I will say that I've been doing this for so long now that it tends to come out of me. I'll be writing a piece and I'll know what the next thing is, what it has to be, so I just write it and move on. But when it isn't flowing, I suppose, like that, what I will do is I will look for the story first, the narrative flow. I will look for what the sequence has to be. So I look for the way in to the story or the article, the point to start at, and then where that point must take me next, where it must take the reader. And when you're writing something, you have to include everything the piece has to include. I mean, well, is that true? Writing, as you write it, that may test the idea of what has to be in, and you may very well drop things out, but you're delivering something, a piece, and you at least need to try to get everything in. So use this as an example. When I knew I wanted to talk to you about this, well, I jotted down some things that I felt were essential, or certainly I believed were essential. Anyway, then what I did was I thought about what obviously follows what. Here's what I wrote down first. I should say, if you can't see it, well, it just simply does not matter because you already get the idea, and I will tell you the points that I think particularly illustrate what it is I'm after. Such as, well, easy. One note there is about an anecdote. Well, obviously I can just chuck that at the end. Yeah, I know that. Chuck it at the end or drop it. One of those. Don't ask questions in articles is equally clearly the point. So it's also the first point. So whack that up at the top. Everything else is harder, but everything else is important. You might be starting with a key point, so that could be your way in to a piece, or you could be working up to a point, and I suppose that's your way out at the end. Still, there is a point, and you're either aiming at it or you're building from it. Decide where that point is at the start or the end, and if it's at the start, look for what must come next. Look for what the inevitable next line has to be. I do think you have to be able to just break all of this and deliberately go off in other directions. I'm thinking about Christmas right now. You have to be able to break that sequence, but you have to know what that sequence is. You are taking a reader through something. And actually, just what I think of it, in articles like this kind of piece, where it flows from the start to the end, particularly in interviews, is called a read-through article. And I also call them a pleasure. Whereas, this is related, the opposite of a read-through is a Q&A interview. You've seen it, those 60 seconds with some celebrity. You read, there's half a dozen questions, they're printed right there in the article, above the celebrity's exciting response. You've seen a million of these. I loathe reading those, but I suppose I'm more loath writing them. But, you know, sometimes that's what you're commissioned to do, and still you can make it better by doing the same kind of thing about the flow. Can't get rid of the questions, can work with the flow because of this. Even though the questions have still got to be there in a Q&A, unfortunately, you can minimize them. There is no obligation for your question as printed to be precisely as you asked the celebrity. I mean, it must be the same question. Of course, it's got to be the same question. But if it took you a full minute and a half to ask them it on the day, still, if you can think of it, you can write a 5-word version for publication, because nobody cares about you and your questions. They only care about the answers. Why wouldn't they? And then the answers do not have to be in the same sequence that you ask them either. This is important. There is actually a huge moral obligation, editorial moral obligation. Examples best. You're interviewing the great celebrity Alan Forbett. You can call him Al. For some reason, whatever, you ask Al, has he ever had any horror stories working with other celebrities? And of course he has. Of course he tells you some juicy one, and obviously, equally, of course, he won't name names. Fine. Nice anecdotal story, great. And you go off onto the next things, you ask him his opinions on, I don't know, gardening, sheds, astrology. He's Al Forbett, sounds the sort to be into star signs. And then something else. You ask him his strong opinions on sewing. But the reason he's talking to you is to promote his new show, so you ask him about that, come to the end of the interview, ask him those questions. He says, it's fantastic. Working with the famous actress Azurti QWERTY. You've heard of her, of course. And you do that, fine, interview is done. You could ditch all but the first and the last question. I mean, maybe you have to. Maybe there isn't space for anything. But you could also reverse them. You could run a piece that says, Al Forbett says Azurti is a wonderful woman in this new show. And then you could run the answer about horror stories with other celebrities. Without you saying so, without Al Forbett saying so, you've just given the impression that everyone else on this show is a foul human being in some way. You haven't actually libeled them, but you've stung. And I think actually you've also put people off the show just by the sequence. The sequence you choose changes the story. So you have to be careful. You have to be responsible, really. But beyond that, you can usefully shape even a Q&A piece to be more readable than a staccato thing. And make it closer to being a nice read-through that takes you somewhere by choosing what questions go in. Well, actually, that's assuming you get answers. All right, that anecdote that I said I'd chuck in later is just this one actor. I really admired his work. He once gave me, I mean, he agreed to the interview. He was giving me 1 and 2 word answers at most, except at one point when he lied about a show. And I'm on the phone thinking, well, I know he's lying. I'd best not tell you who the actor was. There's no possible way you can find out. Anyway, assuming you get actual answers from someone, well, then there's still a limit, isn't it? There are still questions in a Q&A, and honestly, an article is a far, far better read without them. The world is a better place without. So, how do you feel about Capricorn, then? And now, you have read at least thousands of articles. You've had millions of conversations. You have written so much. So you know that I'm coming to the end. You might not have thought it consciously. Maybe your finger, hasn't yet started going for the button to the next video or something. But without question, I like that. Sorry, that just popped into my head. Without question, you know that I'm coming to an end. So let me add something. This is more related than it might sound. Let me say why you should never write anything remotely like, in conclusion, because it's the same thing. Those words are not a question, but they do the same job of making the writer think that he or she can just chuck that in to create an ending rather than bring the narrative flow to its natural end. They do the same job. Asking questions, or in conclusion, they do the same job of telling me that the writer hasn't tried. Don't ask questions in articles. That's it for this 58 Keys writing workshop, or rather, that's it for my part, because your part comes in now in the comments, please. That's just how this has to work. It's two writers talking together. Thank you very much for discussing these things in the comments through episodes so far, and let's keep this going. I want to steal from you. Thank you for watching as well. Take care of yourself, write more, and I'll see you soon.